Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Intro to UI UX Design and Figma workshop. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we will go ahead and get started. Hey, everyone. I am Monsi. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a coach at Major League Hacking and an avocado toast enthusiast. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to come ping me in the Discord at some point. Now, before we jump into our Figma tutorial, we need to understand what design is and where Figma fits into the design process. So first off, what do you all think design means? So I'll give you a couple seconds to type your thoughts in the chat, and then we will continue from there. So I think for me, when it comes to design, I think about usually, yes, exactly. So like an outline, kind of, for sure. That's definitely one part of design. Knowing how to outline your design, making it it could be for brands, things like that. Yes, exactly. Maybe a design is planning the creation of something, for sure. I think that's definitely part of design. And yes, we said an outline also. Awesome. So those are really awesome ideas about what design is. So why don't we jump right into it? So design is the process where you develop user experiences that address specific user problems. So think about different problems that you may face on a daily basis. Even the most simple ones, such as getting to work on time, that is a user problem and it can be addressed through design. And oftentimes, one misconception is that design is art, and that's completely not true. Those are two separate things, and we'll kind of go into that as we continue on. Now, you may have seen something like this before if you come from a design background or even online. So this is what we call the design process. And we will delve deeper into each of these sectors, but just to give a brief overview, this image represents an iterative process that UX designers use when developing their interfaces and product design. So UX designers focus on two main things in the empathize and define process of the UX design process. And so the two questions are, two things we want to focus on are addressing user problems and understanding human interaction. And some questions we might ask before designing our product is, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Who's facing the issue? What are some emotions they feel when encountering this issue? And why create a solution in the first place? In the empathize phase of the design process, teams often conduct user research to learn about their user needs, pain points, which is why the struggles and things that the user are facing, and who their target audience is. By observing and interviewing users, they can understand their problems and experiences to address their needs through design. And so this is where interviewing comes in, and you can help define the project scope and the goals, as well as the foundation for the next steps of the design process. And one quote I often like to think about is in this phase is by Jack Dorsey, who's the co-founder of Twitter and the founder of Square. Jack says that if you want to build a product that's relevant to people, you need to put yourself in their shoes. And this quote really ties into the empathize process because it shows you the importance of understanding each specific need of the user in order to really create a product that will help others. So let's go through an example of the empathize and design stages of the design process. Let's say we find that people who want to send flowers to their family or friends are having difficulties quickly shipping their flowers along with the message. We can then conduct user research in the form of live interviews where we ask users of a wide age range with differing backgrounds about their experiences within online flower shopping, some issues they may face in the design process, and what they wish that the flower purchasing process had. So after doing interviews, you can really understand who your target audience is and some issues that they face. From there, you can now develop what designers call problem and goal statements. In a problem statement, you gather your user research to clearly define who your target audience is, what issues they're facing in their life, and lay out the information clearly. In our case, with online flower shopping, we might have found that while it's nice to send out flowers, the process can be long and confusing depending on the website for individuals in their mid-20s. Again, this is just an example, so just note this may not be an issue happening in real life right now, but it's just to showcase what this process might be like. So in this case, our problem statement, we can say, let's say Tyler, that's our user. And he is a business consultant. And so that's going to be our user characteristics and someone who fits within our target audience. And Tyler needs to buy flowers efficiently for his partner, which is what his user need is, because current applications have complicated user interfaces. And so that's going to be our insight from our user interviews. So with our problem statement, we also need a goal statement. We could write something like this, maybe our product. So whatever our name of our product is, you can modify as you want. And our product is going to let users order custom flower bouquets quickly. So that's going to be what our action is. And this will affect how customers feel throughout the flower purchasing process. And so again, that's who our action is going to affect. And this will give them the ability to customize flower bouquets and include personalized elements. So this is describing how the action will positively affect the users. And we can measure the effectiveness by analyzing customer traffic on the mobile application. So this part is describing how you will measure the impact. With our problem and our goal statements, we can also define personas, which are example user scenarios of who is facing the problem and what their needs are, and a user journey, and that helps define our goals and our thought process in a clear manner. So again, this is just an example, but I hope that makes sense so far. So now that we've defined our clear goals, we have our problem statement and our end goal. We need to move on to the ideate and prototyping phase of the design process. And so this is where you're going to start outlining the design elements for your overall user interface. But it's not more on the visual elements, it's more on the experience that the user is going to have with your prototype. So oftentimes designers might start out with paper wireframes where they make quick little sketches of how their product might look like on the surface. And so creating paper wireframes are really helpful because you can free your mind of all these ideas that you have in your brain before implementing it digitally. And so sometimes this might even be like you set a 2-minute timer and you will just sit down and just sketch out a bunch of ideas that you have running through your brain. And it's just really helpful to just simplify it down in one piece. And so after you go through this process, then designers can move into digital wireframes where they gather all their paper wireframes that they created, maybe in like, say 10 minutes. Like a lot of this process is very fast. So that's one thing to keep in mind, especially in the wireframing process. It's like 2 to 5 minutes just sketching out ideas. And so once you get to the digital wireframes, you combine all of your paper wireframes and start outlining it digitally in what's called low fidelity prototypes. So again, with the low fidelity prototypes, it's not your entire design, just like a kind of outline of what it might look like overall. And so the goal of this process is to help explore possible design ideas and solutions to the user problems and help the design team figure out like which direction they want to go in with their project. And so when the designer is making their digital wireframes, they need to make sure that it demonstrates design thinking aligned with their user research conducted earlier. And so this part of the process is where Figma comes in, which is what we're going to talk about later. And that's an application where you can create basic digital wireframes. Okay, so now we simplified our idea into one design, let's say. So next, what you want to do is test and evaluate. So oftentimes this means bringing in the prototype to users to gather feedback. So then you can learn how to refine your idea. And so in this phase, while there may be many ideas thrown into this phase and users are like, hey, well, what if you add this? What if you add that? So this is where you also need to make sure that you're sticking to your goal and you're sticking to your problem statements and your goals that you created earlier. You want to make sure that you're not going too all over the place and you make sure that you're focusing on what the user needs. So again, remember what you're building, who you're building for, and why you're building something. And now after you incorporate the feedback into your final prototype, you can start to focus on the visual details of the wireframe. So this is where the user interface designers come in and they help with the visual aspects of the product. So this is where you can see UX design is about the experience, and then user interface designers are about the visual elements. And so both of these, UX and UI, they both work together to create cohesive designs for the user's needs. And as you start focusing on the visuals, start noticing how some elements are placed together on the page. So sometimes this might be moving a button so that it's closer to the user's finger when they use their phone. I don't know if you've ever noticed maybe on your Apple iPhone when you're trying to text someone, or you have you want to open the Photos app. If you look at the bottom of your phone, there's like quick, easy access apps at your phone, which are right at the fingertips. It's exactly where you would place your thumb when you're holding your phone. So that's all part of the UI design process, really understanding the visual elements of their interface. And so this could also be like where a button's placed, or even font size. And so in this phase of the design process, development and design teams, they work together to create seamless interfaces ready to present to the market. When the final design is created, then designers and project managers will need to make sure that they evaluate their design first, because you want to make sure that they also understand the product and experience themselves. So they'll kind of feel it out, see how their product is going to be in the real world. And definitely in this point, they'll also compare it with their original designs from earlier on to see how much they've changed in this process, and are they still sticking to their goal and problem statements. And so this will ensure that the customer satisfaction is reached and the success of the product overall. So I just shared a lot of information with you right now. So now we can move on to Figma and explore how it works. So I'm going to switch my tabs real quick and we can move on to Figma. Awesome. And I see, yes, someone asked for the check-in link, and thank you to whoever posted that. Awesome. So this is what Figma looks like on a larger scale. There's a lot of different elements on this. So if you are familiar with Illustrator in Adobe or any Adobe products, it's relatively similar. Or if you're brand new to design at all, that's completely awesome. I will explain everything from front to back. So first off, in this layout, you'll notice there's a whole tab of useful tools on your top left, and a lot of information on the right. So first up, we'll go through the different tools. So this is the mouse tool, pretty self-explanatory with any application, just kind of moving around, selecting objects. This is where you'll go. And then next we have our frame. So if you want to create, let's say you're creating a mobile application for the flower shopping app, then your frames are kind of like your canvas of where you're going to put all the information. So you know how when you're painting, you have a canvas. That's where you put your information, same idea. Except instead we call them frames or artboards. And we also have our rectangle, line, arrow, ellipse, so all the shape tools. And this is where you can use them to draw different shapes and add them into your initial wireframe. So that's one thing I didn't mention. Figma is a way for you to create wireframes to prototype your possible application. So kind of like previewing your final design without actually doing all the code and developing it yet. It's just to kind of see what it'll like before presenting it fully. And then you also have the pen tool, which is pretty awesome. I'll be going through all of these tools, just kind of giving you an overview. The pen tool also allows you to create different shapes. And so I would say it's really helpful. I'll go into how that works. Pencil, same idea. It's a drawing tool. You can add text, and there's different add-ons and things that you can add to your project as well. And then the hand tool is just kind of to drag around the interface if you just kind of want to look at it but don't really want to modify it. So next we'll look at the right side. This is the design section where you can see all the different details. As I start putting information on, you'll see right now we only have the background because that's what we're working with right now. You just have a plain background. And so I'll show you more into that. Prototyping is where you are going to link different elements together. So let's say you finish your whole login page wireframe. Well, when you click the login submit button, it should take you to the next page. So this is where you'll have maybe two screens. You'll have your login page and your welcome page, and you want to link them together. So this is where the prototype section of Figma really comes into handy. because you can specify, hey, when I click the submit button, move to the welcome page. And so when you preview your app, you can actually interact with your project as you almost not programmed it because you're not developing it, but how everything's interacting with each other. So if you did specify that in Figma, then when you actually click the submit button in your preview of your application, it will move to the next page. And also, if you are a developer, this is a great section, Inspect. You can go through the CSS, add information. If you want to work with iOS or Android, you have that option available to you. So it's pretty cool because this is where having Figma allows developers and designers to work together pretty well. So let's start out with our scenario of flower shopping. Let's say we're going to make a frame and we're going to design a mobile application. Let's start with, I don't know, let's say the iPhone 13. So here's our frame. This is like our canvas if you're painting. This is where we're going to put all of our information. And you'll notice as soon as I created this, we have a lot more information in our design tab and in our layer section. So now we have one called iPhone 13 Pro. So that's where you can see the name of it. And we can also feel free to modify it. Let's just change it to, say, our login page. So I'm not going to, in this tutorial, it's not going to be like a complete 100% beautiful user interface, but just the basics to help you understand how different tools work and how you can experiment with yourself to create your own user interfaces. So already we've double tapped and modified our title to include login page, which you can see also at the top left. So especially when you're creating so many different wireframes, it's really helpful to label all your information to make sure it's clear and concise. So first off, you'll notice on the right, there's a lot of information. So your X and Y, and that's like where it is on the page. So if I move it around, you'll notice that's changed. So that's kind of where it is in your entire background. W and H, width and height, how big or small you want your application to be. I'm going to leave it because I specified that we want to make it for the iPhone 13 in this case, so we don't need to modify that. This is like the rotation, so if you want to, for some reason, rotate it, I generally wouldn't, but you can if you want. And then if you want to round the corners of anything, that's super helpful, especially if you're making buttons. And also we have the fill, so if I wanted to, I can change the background to be red, so honestly, anything you want. And then also transparency, if you want it to be transparent. When you're creating the background for your, like the background frame, for a UI, you generally don't want to play around with the transparency. Otherwise, some of the elements are going to be all over the place. So don't recommend modifying that just yet. And then we have our strokes. If you want to create a border, you can do that or not. I'm not going to in this case, just so we can see the frame. And any effects. If you want to have a drop shadow, it's more for visual elements. So if you're creating a button, again, that's a really great way to emphasize things in your design. So, okay, let's think. What do we need in the login page? Well, we're going to need, first off, a logo. So that'll say, okay, what application is this? So I'm going to go ahead and use the ellipse tool and draw a circle. And you'll notice right now it's like an oval or a circle depending on what I want. In this case, I do want a circle. So what I can do is I can hold down the Shift key and it'll ensure that as I modify it, it's only a circle. So without the Shift key, it's kind of all over the place. And if I hold down the Shift key, you get just a circle. And you'll notice that there's these blue lines that are connecting to it. So those are called constraints. If you want to make sure that your elements are perfectly like aligned to a certain area, these constraints are really helpful to make sure all your information is structured accordingly. And so let's say I put my circle over here. Well, I don't really want my logo to be in the top left. I want mine to be in the center. So this is where this top section really helps for that. So these are like your align sections, so you can align it to the center vertically, horizontally, however. In this case, I want to center it here. And right now in this first round, I'm only going to be working in gray, like just neutral colors. We'll add all the content before we actually implement any colors. So great, now we have where our logo is going to be. We also are going to need a section for our username and password. So let's draw two rectangles, and we want to just leave them rectangles, not squares, so we're just going to leave it like that. Maybe something like that. And if you want to create two of them, you can hold down your current one. Oh wait, I think I made two. Yeah, sorry. You can hold down your current one, hold down the Alt key, and drag, and it'll duplicate it. So it's a pretty great way to like duplicate anything that you want on your screen. And so right now it just says like rectangle 1, all this stuff. So we can go ahead and rename it. Let's say our bottom one is going to be password, and our top one is going to be username, and then our ellipse is going to be our logo. Perfect. So we have our username, password. What else do we need? We need a login button. So first off, we are going to, let's make it rectangular for now. So we'll throw it right here. Perfect. We have a button, and I'm going to shift down all the elements in the page. So it is a little bit more centered towards the bottom, and we can definitely modify this as needed. Okay, let's move these a little bit higher. Perfect. And we have our login button. So next, we need to include our text for our username and our password and our submit button. And we also need to put like some sort of welcome message or something like login. So let's include some text. So let's say login. Perfect. And we already have a font in, so we'll just keep it consistent. If I scroll down to the bottom, you can see there's a lot of things if you want to modify your fonts, if you want to create different fonts and add those in, or different text sizes. So I'm just going to increase this to, let's say, 35. And so I'm not following the exact parameters that you would use. I'm just, again, showing you an example. There, if you look it up, they give you specifications on what font sizes, how big you should make your elements on your page. So it's really helpful when you're creating wireframes to know, okay, you don't want to make the text so big so that when the user is looking at their phone, they're like, it takes up the whole page. But you also don't want to make it so small that the user can't see what they're looking at. So that's where definitely research more into that, and definitely helpful when you're creating wireframes. Okay, great. So we have a login text. We need our username and password text. Oh, one thing I also want to mention is shortcuts. So as you start designing wireframes, having shortcuts are really helpful to just kind of switch between tools. So if you notice, if I click the T tab, it'll switch me straight to text. So that way you can automatically flip to that. And if you want to go back to your mouse, you just click V and it'll put you back to your mouse. And the pen tool, you can click P and it'll put you in pen. So it's pretty self-explanatory once you get the hang of it, but definitely really helpful as you're designing. And I also did not fully mention the pen tool yet, so let me explain that real quick. So I'll just do it off to the side. So the pen tool allows you to create shapes or drawings however you want. There is like a freehand pencil tool if you want to as well. But the pen tool is really helpful if you want to create like maybe like a squiggle or something on your screen, or like maybe like a flowy background. So definitely a great option. So you can, when you tap it, it's going to create what are called anchor points. And so you can draw different shapes like this. So for example, look, I just drew a triangle. And so when I do that, I click done. And now I have a triangle and I can fill it and change it as I want. But let's say I don't want to do that. I want to make like a heart or something. So my heart's not going to be exact, but I'll just show you how that works. So instead of just making an anchor point and tapping, what I can do is I can hold it down and drag. And so that'll allow me to bend the lines how I want to. And so it's a really great way for you to create, like, maybe if you want like a flow or something, you can do like something like that. And let's just connect it back. Yeah, so pen tool is a really great way if you want to create any like background elements or just create new shapes as you want. Awesome. So next we have our username that we're going to include. So username. And then we're also going to need, so as you'll notice, I need to make this smaller because obviously we want our login text to be a lot bigger than our username. So let's for now just put it at 24, just so that you can see it visually. And again, definitely would recommend looking at articles that explain how big you should make your text and where you should place the information on the screen relative, so that it's easier that the user can just tap it with their thumb, because you put the button right where their thumb would be if they're using their phone. Awesome. So we have our password. Perfect. So now we can go ahead. Oh, wait, I need to add submit here. And okay, perfect. So we have our submit button. We have, and again, I'm going to, yeah, I'll just leave that there for now, and then we can center it after. So let's say I'm like, okay, I like the information that's on here, but I think the username and password should be a little bit more spaced out from login. Well, I could select this and then move it down individually and then move the box. But instead, what I can do is I can select both items that I want and group them. So if I right click, I can click group selection so that now if I want to move it down, it's all in one element. And you'll also notice, that now that once I've grouped the elements, it'll show up as a group and you can see the subgroups of what's in there. So let's go ahead and do that the same with password as well. We'll group it all together. And then let's also do that with the button to make it easier. Now let's say I've just left my text over here, for example. Let's again practice with aligning. So we'll center it to the button, center it on the vertical, and now we can group it together. Okay, great. So we have our username, password, submit, everything's aligned, and we have it grouped. So let's say I want to move this down. It's a lot easier now. And we're missing some sort of logo. For now, we can just put like F for flower or something. And let's change our font size to be, let's say 50. Okay, even maybe 70. Make it really big. And let's change our font to be something completely random. How about this font? Sure, that's a great font. Well, you start with that. And again, let's center it real quick. So center and vertical. Perfect. So we have our logo. We have some sort of login page. Let's start adding by adding a little bit of color. So we can go to our fill, and that's going to be, so the difference, let me explain the difference between fill and stroke before I continue. So fill is like the inside of your circle. So all of this gray will change as I change with the fill. And then the stroke is your outline. So as I just click the plus, it'll create an outline, and then you can make it as big or small as you want. So if I do this, it'll make it bigger, smaller, etc. And then you can change the color, transparency, and just remove it completely if you don't want it. So let's take this and let's go with this color. Now, one thing to mention with design is right now you can notice this is not very readable at all. So generally, one big design practice that you never want to do is cool colors with black text. It is not visually appealing or accessible for users who may not be able to see text as clearly. So this is where you want to make sure that you always have contrasting elements. So in this case, black is not very readable, but what if we just make it white? Now you can actually see the letter F instead. So it makes a huge difference when you're designing wireframes. Okay. Oops. Okay, so we have that. Let's make it blue for fun, some sort of blue. Okay. Now let's say we want to keep this blue consistent with our other elements. What we can do is we can go to our submit button, for example, and let's say, well, we want this exact same blue, but we don't need to type in this entire information again just to get the same color. So what we can do is we can go to our shortcuts and click I. So that's one of our shortcuts. And you'll notice in the top right, you'll see that it's showing me what color I'm like hovering around. So if I hover around this blue, it'll tell me exactly what I want. I can click it and it'll transfer the color to our box here. And because the elements are grouped together, they both got changed to blue, but I'm going to change the text back to white so that we can actually see it. And let's do the same with the username and password. Also, one thing I didn't mention as I was doing it is, okay, let's say I selected this one, but I also want to change the color of this one too at the same time. I can hold down the Shift key and click, and I'll be selecting both of them. So I'll use my eyedropper tool again and pick the blue element. And now let's go back into our group and change our text to white so you can see it. And again, same thing here. Oops, sorry, that was a fill. We want to do it with our text. So we'll go over here, change it back to white. Perfect. So now we have our element, all of our information on the page. We have some color. Not a big fan of this blue, so maybe let's make it some sort of like a lighter blue or something, just to give it a little bit of differentiation. Now you'll notice with current user interfaces, maybe say if you're on Google or something and you're typing in your information, it's generally not this sort of rectangular box shape. So to give it a little bit more visual appealing elements, what you can do is you can take your rectangles and go to our round corner tool that I mentioned earlier, and we can go ahead and round the corner. And so it'll give it a little bit of a different feel. So I'm just going to move this over slightly just so it's not in the way. And we can align it with the other one. Oh, also, one thing to mention is as I'm moving this, you'll notice all these red lines. And so these are called smart guides. And they allow you to kind of see how you're aligning information on the page and help you make sure that it's all even. So definitely very helpful. Okay, so we have some sort of login. Let's go ahead and modify our button a little bit. And let's try an effect this time. So let's add a drop shadow and maybe round our button a little bit. So now, yeah, we can pick a drop shadow, an inner shadow, layer blur. So lots of different options. Like maybe, let's say, what you could do with this layer blur, which is pretty cool, is you could have another button, like an actual button on top, and then use the background as like a blurred version of itself to give it like some extra depth. In this case, I think I'm just going to go with drop shadow for now, just to give some differentiation from the rest of our elements on the page. Okay, and let's change the font of this to be something completely different. Let's see, inspiration, that is kind of an insane font. Maybe we can just leave it for now, or a simple font like Roboto. Does that exist? Yes, it does. Perfect. So we have our login page complete. Now we want to say, okay, great, we have some login information. What about our welcome page? So that's where we can create another frame. And let's go back to our frames, pick iPhone, I think we're doing, iPhone 13, not 3, that would be crazy. And so we aligned our artboards. And so now this is going to be our welcome page. So we want to rename it and say welcome page. Okay, real quick, let's just look if we have any questions. Awesome, no questions. Is it possible to change the rectangular radius partially, like one corner is round and the others are sharp? So you can't do that with the corner rounder tool that I did show you, but I can show you another way to do that if you want, which is a little bit more manual. That's where like the pen tool might come in handy, is you can create your own, like, let's say you want a rounded corner here and then make the rest sharp like that or something. And again, if you hold on the shift key, you can keep it like a straight line instead of it going all over the place. And that will give you like your one corner rounded effect. You can make like the anchor points so they're actually in line so it's straight. But the pen tool is where you would have to do that if you wanted to make one corner round and the rest of them sharp. So definitely feel free to play around with the pen tool. It's pretty awesome, but it takes a second to get used to. Okay, awesome. No more questions, so I will continue on. Okay, so now we have our welcome page. Just to show you kind of how the prototyping actions take place, let's say we have our text, and we're like, let's say, welcome to the next page. Perfect. Now, that's all great and all, but how are we going to get from this page to that page? Because now, also one thing I didn't mention is we have our present button. So this will allow you to preview what your application looks like. So if I go ahead and click that, let me share our previewed application. So when I click the share button, it will show us our preview login page. So you can see this is what we just created and you're showing it on a mobile device. So if you're ever presenting to, let's say, stakeholders or engineers on your team that you're working with, you can show them this and it'll show you exactly how it would look on a phone. And it's showing the iPhone 13 because that's what we specified our frame to be. So this is what our prototype looks so far, but you'll notice that we created another page, our welcome page with the text, and it's not showing up here. Well, the key is we need to link the pages. So at the beginning, I did mention that we had our prototype section of Figma. So I'm going to go ahead and reshare my screen and show you where we can start linking the pages together. Because when you link the pages together, that's how you can really preview what the application will look like. So let's see. Okay, perfect. Back on the Figma page. These are our two pages. So now we can go to our prototype section. And we can say, okay, well, let's say you fill in all the information for our login page. Now, the key is to go to the next page, you click the submit button. So this is where we can start with our interactions. So you'll notice I selected the submit button, and we'll click the plus on interactions and say, okay, when we tap the button, then we want it to go to the welcome page. So we can go onto here. And again, when you're doing interactions, you can do like on drag, hovering, scroll down, things like that. Just different interactions that the user might do, just so that you can preview your application. So I'm going to say when I tap the submit button, I want to navigate to the welcome page. And you'll notice it creates like a link. It's going to show that when I click this button, I'll link it to the next page. And it's pretty cool because there's so many different options. Like you can have it scrolling, like just different things to actually show how your application would work without actually having to develop it yet. And I've definitely seen this also in hackathon projects where when they're presenting to judges per se, they might have like a prototype to show this is what our idea would look like, and then have the development process on the side too. So definitely something to consider if you guys are all interested in hackathons. Okay, awesome. So we have our page linked. So now when we preview it, and I will bring it back to that page so you can see that. Awesome. So this is our preview. And you notice right now I didn't create any interactions so you can type in your username or password. But now if we click the submit button, it will take us to our next page. So this is pretty awesome because now when you're creating so many different wireframes, let's say you're creating a whole application, each screen is going to be a lot of information. And you want to make sure that you're able to hop between each of the pages seamlessly so you can show how it would work in a real world sense. So this is kind of just a preview of what Figma is like, how to create the interactions. And I think that's pretty much all the information. One more thing I would like to cover though too is definitely how to share it. You can share your application with other people. If you want multiple, let's say you have many different UX designers on your team, then Figma is really nice. You can share it with other people and everyone can modify it at once. So it's pretty cool. It's kind of like Google Docs, but for design. And one more thing I didn't mention is, let's say, okay, great. I like how this looks, but maybe I want to zoom in a little bit, make sure everything's perfect. So you can do Control+, and that will allow you to kind of move in. Well, now I'm zoomed in too much, and I kind of want to move to the left, but I don't really want to use these scroll bars on the left and bottom, or on the right and bottom. And so instead what you can do is you can use the shortcut, which is a space bar, and it'll transfer to this little hand, or you can go to the top left and use the hand tool up there. So in my case, I'm just going to use the shortcut. I'll hold the space bar down, and then I can drag wherever I need to go. So I'm going to, let's say, I want to see, okay, are these aligned? Yes, they're aligned. They're all in one. If I were to draw a straight line down, you'll see that they're aligned with each other. So that's just a great way if you want to like move around, kind of scroll through your interface. Pretty cool to see. So I think that is pretty much it as far as our intro to like what the different tools are. But I really hope this was helpful just to kind of get a sense of what Figma's like, where it fits in the design process, and when you would actually be using it as like a UI UX designer or even developer. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. And if you have any questions, I'll stick around for any last minute questions, but that is pretty much our workshop. Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining, and I hope to see you at future MLH events.